Hi, it's Dave. In this video, I'm going to share a framework of thinking that helps give me an edge in investing. Elon Musk calls it reasoning by first principles versus reasoning by analogy. Let's take a deeper look. All right, as with all of my videos, they are a stream of consciousness where they share my current thoughts and my current opinions that will change over time. And so it's more of a journey. So first off, I think a lot of people, when they look at investing and they look at companies, they try to analyze the exterior or what makes sense. So they look at the financials first, or they look at certain growth figures and they say, oh, this company is growing 20% or 30% year over year. Or lots of people might be tempted to focus firstly on revenue and they go, hey, look, they have $1 billion in revenue or $100 billion of revenue. And other people might look at the number of users, right? 1 million active users or 500,000 customers, etc. And when you look at the exterior and the outer kind of figures of a company, there are actually millions of reasons to buy a company or to buy stock in a company. But however, I think we need to take a deeper look at this and we need to try to understand priorities. For example, if something is like the 100th most important thing, and you think that it is the most important thing when you analyze a company, then you likely are going to miss that most important thing because your priorities are in the wrong place. In other words, it's impossible to analyze every single thing about a company. I think the best chance we have is to first prioritize and spend most of our time focusing on what's truly the most important. And I think it's kind of strange that people typically don't focus on what's most important. Well, they might focus on what they think is most important, but in a way, it's kind of human nature. We're swayed by our senses, and oftentimes the sensational, right, really attracts us, and we want to make sense of things very quickly. And so rather than trying to spend time really looking underneath the surface of things and pondering the core essence of a product or company, oftentimes we're just tempted to make a quick assessment, right? And we need the numbers and the figures and all the external shell. However, when we find the core and the essence of a company or a product, that is kind of the true starting point, in my opinion, to really understand what a company is and where it's headed in the future. Then you can work backwards and add on top of that all the other things to analyze a company. And I think that's the error of reasoning by analogy. When you reason by analogy or comparison, you're kind of comparing the surface of two things, right? You're comparing the figures or the revenue of this company versus this company, or you're comparing the so-called products of this company versus the other company. However, we're not really going underneath the surface and understanding it at a core level. And that's where reasoning by first principles comes into play. When you reason by first principles, which is originally a physics concept, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to the core first. You're trying to get to the basic building blocks of what you know is true, or at least what you know you have the most confidence in being true. And then from there, you work and build further on. Let me give you an example of Tesla. So back in the day, let's say in 2012 or 2013, when I was first investing in Tesla, a lot of people were looking at Tesla as a car company. And actually, even right now, a lot of people still do. And they looked at Tesla through the eyes of, let's say, financials. And they saw a company that was bleeding money, that was not profitable. They saw a quite erratic CEO that didn't fit into the mold of a typical Wall Street or Fortune 500 CEO. And they saw a lot of people on Wall Street betting against this company. The whole sentiment and attitude toward this company was it was pretty much impossible for it to make it. However, all of this is reasoning by analogy. In other words, it's reasoning by comparison. They look at, let's say, current OEM car makers and they say, hey, Tesla is a car maker, right? Or they look at Tesla as a Silicon Valley company that maybe doesn't even know how to make cars. And all of this reasoning by analogy has turned out to be a very costly mistake for those people who, rather than investing in a company like Tesla, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago, they chose to bet against Tesla. And so there's a huge amount of, let's say, redistribution or changing of fortunes in a sense. Those who bet against Tesla, right, a lot of money went from their hands to the hands of people who are betting for Tesla. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that reasoning by analogy is, in a lot of ways, an inferior way to analyze a company, a situation, or a product. What is much more effective way is reasoning by first principles. Now, a lot of people might look at Tesla and people who invested in Tesla earlier on, and they say, hey, that was just luck, right? And there's no way you could have guessed that Tesla would have been a great success. I think there is a role of fortune, and there also always is a role of luck in any company or any product or stock. However, beyond that, I think it's important to say, hey, did we get to the core? Can we understand, right, this company for what the company truly is rather than what the company we think it should be based upon comparisons? Now, I think this first principle thinking is an underrated skill and approach. It's not taught much anywhere. And I think it's underappreciated, especially in the area of investing. A lot of times, a typical investing approach will be completely reasoning by analogy or comparison. Now, I want to do two things here. First, I want to take a look at a clip of a recent interview that Elon did in Germany, where he explains how important this first principle thinking is. And then after his segment, I want to go ahead and give some different examples of how people have missed some really big winners in the stock market by having this mistaken kind of reasoning by analogy.
How do you manage to dive so deeply into so many different engineering challenges?
Well, I studied physics, and I'd certainly strongly recommend physics as a good grounding to understand the nature of reality. I mean, physics is fundamentally just understanding how does the universe actually work. And then that's a good foundation for then a variety of engineering disciplines. And I think also the analytical principles, the sort of analytical constructs used in physics apply to basically anything. Physics developed all these ways of thinking, like first principles thinking, thinking about things in the limit of high and low, testing your hypothesis. It's the scientific principle essentially. These things are incredibly helpful in all arenas. It's just most people tend to think by analogy or by comparison with something that already exists, and this is a sort of a mental shortcut that requires less brain strain, but it does not. It's hard to get fundamental insights unless you think about things from a first principle standpoint.
And the first principle standpoint is kind of deductive thinking that almost has like the force of a natural law, of a physical law of making things happen because they need to happen.
No, first principles thinking is just saying, okay, what are the most fundamental truths that we know about any given situation? Like the things that, at a very granular level, the sort of simplest building blocks that we're most convinced are true, and then you reason up from those fundamental axioms, and then it's just sort of cogent thinking would be another way to refer to it as say like, are these axioms believed to be the most believed to be true? Are they the most relevant? Do they necessarily lead to a conclusion? What is the probability associated with that conclusion? Because reality is really probability. It's not deterministic. It's not one or the other.
All right, this skill of cogent thinking that Elon Musk is talking about, or first principle thinking, oftentimes referred to as critical thinking or thinking beneath or underneath the surface, right? Getting to the essence of things. I think this is a highly underappreciated and highly underrated skill. This is perhaps one of the most valuable skills that you can have, not just with investing, but with business, with relationships, with health, with parenting, with all facets of life. And so let's take a deeper look into this. I want to give some examples to make it more concrete, because I think a lot of times it can be kind of conceptual. So a lot of times people use reasoning by analogy and comparison, and they miss out on the biggest winners, right, in the stock market, right? Companies that go up 10x or 100x, right, and become generational companies. Let's take an example with Facebook. Now with Facebook, a lot of people looked at it through reasoning by comparison or analogy, and they said, hey, this is just like a glorified MySpace, or this is just like a teen hangout social network or something. And they looked at Mark Zuckerberg, right, this guy with a hoodie, right, and he just didn't look the part. And they're like, what is Facebook? And I remember when Facebook first went public, like people just ranted on Zuckerberg in the press, and I talked to a bunch of friends and they're just like, yeah, Facebook is a terrible company, etc. And I think at that time the crucial misunderstanding was people didn't understand Facebook at its core or its essence. I remember I was following Paul Graham, who runs Y Combinator, and it's kind of a Silicon insider. And he made this interesting comment back in the day. And he said, Facebook, even though they don't show a ton of revenue right now, they could just switch on the revenue switch whenever they choose to. This was like a few years before they went IPO. And I think what that shows is, in a sense, Paul Graham was getting more of the essence of Facebook. What Facebook had, in a sense, was huge network effects. Once they had, for example, all your friends on the network sharing information, and Facebook had this huge amount of leverage to gain attention and to attract attention of people. And the matter of revenue or monetizing, right, that attention was simply putting ads onto that layer of Facebook. And so Facebook had amazing ad revenue potential if you just looked at the core or the essence of what Facebook really was. It was really the dominant social network platform that would just grow increasingly dominant over time, and it would be rather easy, right, to monetize that through just simply ads, right, display ads, monetizing people's attention. All right. Example number 2, let's look at the iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, a ton of people just discounted it, right? Looked down on it and said, what is this thing, right? And it was completely reasoning by analogy or comparison. And when you look at that, like one of the famous quotes was Steve Ballmer, right? At that time, the CEO of Microsoft. And he looked at the iPhone and he's like, man, this will never succeed, right? They're never going to even sell 10 million of these per year. And oftentimes people looked at it and they go, look at Nokia, right? Look at BlackBerry, right? They have so many customers and so many different lines of phones. I remember my wife at the time said, I'm never getting an iPhone, right? Like I had literally the first iPhone, or on the first day I had the iPhone, and I showed it to a bunch of my friends and colleagues, and I'm like, this is the future, right? This is going to change everything. And my wife actually, my coworker at that time was saying, I'm never going to get an iPhone like ever because it doesn't have a keyboard. And she had a BlackBerry that had introduced to her a few years before, and she loved that thing, right? She loved the keyboard, the ability to check email and all of that stuff. And I think a lot of people, when they looked at the iPhone, they looked at it as like this expensive toy. Right? Who needs something like that? All my needs are met, let's say, with the BlackBerry. And I think what they failed to realize was the iPhone at its core was a desktop class operating system. It was a mega computer, a supercomputer that could do everything, right? And more than, let's say, just a desktop computer, let's say a few years or several years before that. And they added onto it portability. They added onto a touch interface. They added onto it like a camera. And all of this stuff was the beginnings of an entire new platform and experience that people would carry around in their pockets. And at its core, the iPhone was a revolution if you looked at it for what it really was. If you looked at it through first principles thinking rather than right on the surface level through reasoning by comparison. All right, example number 3, let's look at Amazon. Now, when Amazon was first getting going, and even the first, let's say 10, 15 years, a lot of people looked at Amazon as just this company that would never make money. And they ridiculed Amazon and Jeff Bezos, and they said, this guy's just spending money and they're never going to be profitable. And there was so much buying opportunity with Amazon throughout the years, partly because the entire market was just so lured by this reasoning on surface level, right? Reasoning by analogy. But if you looked at Amazon at its core, Amazon had rebuilt the entire infrastructure and the entire shopping experience from the ground up. They had created an entire logistics network to offer, right, cheap, actually free, so-called what they call free shipping in 2 days or so. They had brought together an immense amount of products and merchants onto their platform. And they had focused in a ruthless way to focus on customer satisfaction. You could return any of your items or most items very quickly and very easily. I think what Amazon represented at the core was a complete remake of the shopping experience. And it wasn't just a singular outlet of e-commerce. Rather, it was an entire platform that people misunderstood the ambitions, right, of Jeff Bezos, but also the economies of scale that Amazon could have when it grew so large, that as it grew larger, their logistics network grew larger, the infrastructure grew larger, they could offer cheaper prices, more selection, and their competitive advantage would grow over time. Now, if you were to look at first principle thinking and analyze these companies at its core, you would have a tremendous advantage in investing. And I think this is kind of like the secret sauce that I think not many people talk about with investing. All right, let's look at example number 4. Example number 4 is autonomous driving. Now let's look at the core of what autonomous driving is. I think there are a couple things. One is, in order to drive autonomously, a car needs to navigate right through roads and to be ultra safe, right? Even safer than a human. However, at its core is the system and the roads and the whole kind of transportation system around us is all built around passive optical. And what that means is it was all built around the ability for the human eye to see, right, the signs and the curves and all of this stuff. So the transportation, the roads, they weren't meant to be driven by a computer, right? They were meant to be driven by certain eyes that could see, right, different distances and different focus levels. And so in that sense, when you're trying to solve the autonomous driving problem, you're trying to solve a problem where you're driving in a certain transportation system, right? In a certain system of roads that were designed a certain way. I think the best way to do that is to solve for passive optical, meaning using machine learning and neural nets to basically look at the roads and to look at the roads as if a human was looking at it, right, through cameras, analyze like all the objects and determine how to navigate that driving situation safely. And if you look at the autonomous driving field, there are tons of approaches, right? People are tempted with LiDAR or high resolution maps. But if you look at first principle thinking, what is the core essence of autonomous driving and how you solve for that? I think it's pretty evident and clear that actually Tesla is doing the first principle approach with autonomous driving. And that's why as a Tesla investor, just as an investor, I'm most excited about Tesla's approach. And I think they're in the pole position or the leading position with autonomous driving because most importantly, they see it clearly and accurately compared to their competitors. All right, when trying to develop kind of first principle thinking or thinking beneath the surface, trying to get to the core and essence of things, I think there are different enemies at hand or different obstacles. First is oftentimes people have a fixation or a focus on people's credentials or degrees. Their position or their pedigree, and they go, hey, PhD or expert in something, and they're swayed by all of these outer kind of characteristics. However, for first principle thinking, it's important to get past out of all of the outer things. That's one of the reasons why my channel, I'm not really focused on, for example, my pedigree or my degrees or even my stock position per se to justify, let's say, what I'm saying. What I'm trying to do is build a thinking process and just share just in real time how I'm approaching investing so that other people can understand that, hey, this is actually really important and valuable stuff. Now, most people in investing, they're looking at things on a surface level. They're looking at numbers and financials and the form and the outer exterior. But I think probably one of the most important things when you look at a company through first principles is to find the key insight or insights from the founder. Meaning, what is it about the founder? What is it about his values, his thinking, his approach that has led him to this valuable insight that has created this company and this product? And what is his strategy, right? That comes from that core insight. And I think a lot of times we can find the essence of the company in its founder and in the essence of its product. Overall, I think it's super important to actually start investing with this first principle thinking and to have first principles thinking in every investment. If I was to teach, let's say, a younger person regarding how to invest, I would actually begin with this. Like, what is first principles thinking? How do you think and analyze something beneath the surface? How do you get to the essence and core of what makes a business successful and what makes a business grow over time? And what makes, right, a stock price actually what a stock price is? All right, if this video has been helpful, go ahead and like it and subscribe to my video for more videos like this. I typically do company analysis videos, I do investment philosophy videos, and I do a lot of interviews with other investors and other domain experts so I can learn about new industries. All right, I want to hear from you also. Are you using first principles thinking in your investment approach? What companies has surprised you about their core and essence of what they offer as a product or as a company? All my videos are also available as a podcast. Just look for Dave Lee on Investing. And I'm active on Twitter. My handle there is HeyDave7. And we'll see you in my next video. Thanks.